A Canadian family has held a gender reveal party for their 8-year-old daughter after she told them, "I don't feel like a boy inside," at the age of 6. Let me break this down for you for those that are confused by the headline. A 6-year-old boy told his family that he was in fact a girl, and so the family held a new gender reveal party for the child who is now 8 years old. The child from Ontario was born male, but always felt like a girl inside. Her family held a gender reveal party to introduce her to her wider family. Mother Nikki set up a social media page to offer advice on transitioning young. I'll give you my opinion right away. I've removed the images. I don't want to show the kid. I don't want to bring any undue. I don't want to. I don't know. I just want to respect a little bit of the privacy, but I think the story is just extremely important. The Daily Mail showed the Instagram account for this family, and so I looked, and I believe this is not the story of a trans child. This is the story of parents that I believe are suffering from Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Likely the mother, in my opinion, I'm not a medical doctor, I could be wrong, and the father is just too weak to care. And the reason I think that is not because it's a common idea when it comes to issues like this, but if you look at the social media profile for the family, it's very much desperately trying to generate attention. They're going to events, they're posting what I would just describe as inappropriate photos of their child, things like that. And a 6-year-old, I'm sorry, just doesn't know. It's not reality. There are many things that children say. I remember when I was a kid, and I would just say things because I heard my parents say them. And that's the issue we're facing now. Is this a child who genuinely believes or is genuinely trans? Or is it just that the parents were encouraging certain things, showing this child certain books, which they were, and then the child said, "Yeah, okay, I'm that." There is a viral story going around where this woman says, "We're allies, so I got my child books on trans children, and now they're claiming they're trans." The parent says, "I don't think that's true. I wonder why this is happening." And it's, look, prepubescent children don't understand certain feelings. They're very impressionable, and that's why you have to guide them. If a 6-year-old came to you and said that they wanted to be a go-go dancer, you would say, no. Yet, something that is actually a bit beyond go-go dancing, like drag performances, which are inherently sexual, parents are telling their children they can do. If you want to look at a family like this and see stories like this, if you want to understand why these parents are probably wrong, why they are likely causing a identity crisis for their child, you need only look at the drag performers, the drag children that parents are they're having their kids do these drag performances, because that's not an identity. That's at the bare minimum, you can call it a culture or lifestyle or hobby or something. But drag performances are inherently sexual. They are adult men who dress in what's the right way to describe it? I guess they dress like a caricature of a woman with fake foam hips and fake foam breasts, and they remove clothing on stage in exchange for money. It is inherently sexualized, shaking their hips and thrusting and doing things like that, getting down low, other things like that. They do it for money. It is almost stripping, almost fully nude stripping. Stripping actually doesn't always mean you get naked. There are many states that don't allow nude performances, so the women who strip take their clothes off, but only down to, like a bikini or something, which is publicly illegal. Still not appropriate for kids. So that's drag. So when they bring drag performances to children or encourage children to do drag performances, these kids don't have an identity. These kids didn't wake up one day and just say, "I don't know why, but I really want to dress up like a caricature of a woman and dance around, take my clothes off for money." No, it's because they witnessed someone else do it. Now, you have these two circumstances, drag kids and trans kids. The argument from the left is that drag is just a performance and it's a costume party. and that trans is an inherent thing within the child. Yet, as Bill Maher pointed out, why is it happening in places like California and not happening in places like Ohio? He says either Ohio is suppressing it or California is creating it. In my opinion, I don't think 6-year-olds know. I don't think so. I think it is possible. I think it absolutely is. I think in many circumstances, I don't think the majority, there are children who are legitimately transgender and experience gender dysphoria. And the reason I think that's true is because of the story of John Money. I believe that there are some people who genuinely have gender dysphoria. I think the problem is when you get parents with Munchausen syndrome by proxy, they begin to influence their kids, tell them these things. And then when the kids say, okay, me, I'm like that, the parents just go, you got it, instead of actually trying to explore it. So I think the challenge is one of the big issues we're facing right now with this stuff is going to children who are not exposed to this idea, showing them books, explaining all these things to them, and planting the seeds of these ideas and then confusing them. I believe the most effective way to help children who are trans is to not expose them to this. So that way, if they come about the experience on their own and tell their parents, the parents can say, let me talk to you about it. The issue, however, is there is a social contagion element to much of what we are seeing. Parents who are encouraging it, giving literature to kids who don't understand it, and then the kids just say, sure, I guess. And the parents go, aha. And then they bring about a permanent change to a child who is too young to understand what any of this stuff means. That's a big problem. But here's what I want to get to with the philosophical argument here, I suppose the thesis of this. What do you do when freedom is in the mix? We believe, I say we, but I should say many people, that parents ultimately make the decisions for their children. So in the case of Florida, the Parental Rights and Education Bill, there is a logical conundrum when it comes to the ethics of what's happening. In the schools, you have strangers grooming kids. Well, that's wrong. It should be up to the parents to decide when their kids learn about these things. But what happens when you have parents in this circumstance telling their 6-year-old these things and transitioning them? Do we then come out and say, no, that's wrong, you can't do that? Or do we say, well, the parents know best? And that's the issue for me. Some people say it's not fair to the child. And I'm like, well, maybe. I don't know where that line is. The parents decided to expose their children to information they thought was important. And now we've met stories like this. This is interesting. There are arguments that obviously, if you show adult materials to children, no matter in any context, it could be a crime. If an adult parent is showing lewd images to children, it could be a crime. But what about sex education? Are you going to accuse a parent of abusing their child because the kid was 6 and the parent said, we're going to have the talk about the birds and the bees? Well, the birds and the bees is not pornographic. A parent decided they wanted to get their kid to understand this at a younger age. What about kids who grow up on farms and see animals banging their entire life, and then the parent says, let me explain to you what's going on and how this stuff works, when the child is 6 or 7 years old because they're watching it happen on the farm? It's tough, isn't it? Ultimately, I will tell you this. There are real problems that arise out of this, and I don't know what the solution to the problem is. I suppose the issue is there is no simple answer to when a society should tolerate too much individual liberties or allow people to be individually to entertain their own individual liberties. There's no real easy answer because there are ramifications to freedom. I suppose, in my opinion, you will have families who transition their children. I think it's wrong, but I don't want to intervene and interfere with a family and how they think they should be raising their kids, because you will get weird. Look, the conversation here is actually twofold. Should I tell this Canadian family how to raise their kids? Well, if I do, then what's to stop them from telling schools or telling me how I should raise my kids? I don't have any kids, by the way, but you get the point. Do we just say, okay, fine, do your thing? And I don't know. There's a real challenge to this because it extends into the public health issue. SF Gate. San Francisco is veering towards a public health mess on monkeypox. All right. Well, let's just come out and say it. Monkeypox is spreading, particularly among gay men. So it's no surprise that San Francisco is seeing an outbreak and a crisis. They need vaccines. Everyone pays the price for those vaccines because men, knowing there's an outbreak, don't care and engage in activities with each other that spreads the disease. Interesting moral and ethical conundrum, I suppose. Seriously. At what point do we say we can't allow people to be doing a thing if it's causing a public health crisis, or do we just say you're on your own? That's the big issue. Let me wrap these stories together and tell you what I'm saying. You have a family that is transitioning their child. In all likelihood, will give the child drugs, which will sterilize the child. I believe that child will grow up and be very, very angry about this. I do. And there's going to be a public reckoning on the sterilization of children. Because it's one thing if you're an adult gay man engaging in adult activities in an area where there's a monkeypox outbreak and then you get monkeypox. That's one issue, but you made your choice. You're an adult. For these children, they're being raised by parents who are going to irreparably harm their bodies. And I mean that quite literally, irreparably harm. Well, there are, in my opinion, people who are trans who say they wish they transitioned before puberty so that they would look more like the biological sex they wish to represent as. There are going to be many children who typically would desist. That is to say, at around puberty, they say, okay, that's not the case. Then come the puberty blockers, which cause bone density issues, brain development issues, eye issues, knee issues, and can permanently sterilize the child. These kids are going to grow up, and we're going to get a John Money situation. The John Money story is a tale about the dangers of meddling in these things. 2 kids were born, both male, twins, botched circumcision. So John Money says, how about we force this child to be raised as a female and give them female hormones? When this child learned the truth, immediately transitioned back to their biological sex and was outraged, was angered, and then ultimately committed suicide. And then their brother ultimately committed suicide. John Money forced these children to engage in simulated adult activities with each other. It was horrifying. The Orville, Seth McFarlane's show, did a show about a baby in 2017 that was forcefully transitioned from female to male. They followed up with a detransition story. Actually kind of crazy in my opinion, for Seth MacFarlane to actually do this. About the child who did not want to be the other represented as the other biological sex and then detransitioned. It seemed like they tried to play both sides on the issue with, one parent refusing to allow the child to detransition and them saying your traditions. It's like, okay, it's really interesting. Let me just put it this way. They did a show about in the future, a trans child wanting to be their biological sex, and it was tradition to transition them, and it was progressive to say, let them be their biological sex. I suppose the idea was to play both sides, but it really was ultimately a story about detransitioning a child who was unhappy. Here's where I think we're going with all of this. It's an implosion. The natural consequence will be, I guess, look, the people who are knowingly engaging in adult activities which spreads monkeypox will face the repercussions of that. In this instance, they are seeking vaccines, which the public has to pay for. It's remarkable, isn't it? Morbidly obese people want universal health care. Men who are engaging in sex acts with each other and getting monkeypox want vaccines from the government, meaning everyone has to pay the price for what these people choose to do. It's an untenable situation. For those who are morbidly obese and want universal health care, they have health issues because they choose to eat and not exercise. Well, that's a problem. That's not sustainable. You can't make healthy people who make the right choices pay for those who don't. Men who know monkeypox is spreading want others to pay for them to be able to do these things during this health crisis. In the end, the system buckles under the pressure in 2 ways with both of these stories. The trans children, many of them are going to be sterilized. Look, I get it. The parents have chosen that. I don't know if I should be intervening in how the parents decide to raise their kids. You may see these children as victims, and I get it. So we're going to have to, litigate that and figure out where the line is. But if liberals choose to be morbidly obese, defend it with body positivity. If they choose to abort their children, if they choose to sterilize their children, and they choose to engage in adult activities which spreads a serious disease, the end result is simple. Good times make weak men make hard times make strong men, right? In the end, the conservative who believes in merit, who eats healthy, who exercises, who abstains from these things that could result in detriment to their health, who chooses to raise their kids to be healthy and strong and have kids of their own. The mathematical equation is quite simple in all of this. You can come down and blame the parents. You can criticize abortion. You can criticize what these men are doing. But in the end, I think it's kind of simple. The left is removing themselves from the gene pool. The right has fortified themselves against these things. And the end result will be conservatives will have more kids. Those kids are more likely to reproduce, and give it 20 years and this country is Christian conservative, period. There's no argument. It's pointless. Why are we seeing this big right-wing push, this right-wing populist, this Christian conservative resurgence? Because liberals aborted their children. They are less likely to have kids. They're more likely to abort. So that means this generation, 20 years ago, I've talked about the data, 20 years ago, conservatives were having about 25% more, or 25% more likely to have kids. Conservatives were having 2.01 children to liberals 1.5. That means give it 20 years and the generation will be slightly more conservative just because conservatives are raising these kids, which is why I often say, if the Republican Party, if conservatives, if Trump supporters win on the issue of school choice, the left will cease to exist because they're doing it to themselves. And that's where I get to the point of where's the line in individual freedoms? Me, I'm very much all about it. So when people talk about the pandemic and wearing masks, I say, stay home. If you're scared, stay home. When it comes to the monkeypox stuff, I'm like, I don't got anything to worry about because it's spreading among the gay community. And among the gay community, it's those who choose to engage in this. And not every guy is. There's probably many gay men who are like, I'm worried about monkeypox, so we should chill out. Give it 2 months. Abstain for 2 or 3 months. Monkeypox is gone. But they don't. So it spreads. Well, it's not going to affect me. So if people want to choose to do that and take the risks, that's on them. And then they will face the detriments of this. Parents who want to sterilize their kids, there's a concern. The children are being victimized. What do you do, though? Parents can decide for their children. Unless you want the government to intervene and say, this is what you must do when you raise your kids. And therein lies the challenge there. If the right embraces the idea the state can set a line on how children must be raised, then what if they come in and say, you must transition your kids? Or we can sit back and say, parents know best, let me stay out of it. That's why the end result I have on this is much more libertarian. And while I am concerned about what happens to these kids who grow up and then freak out because their parents did this to them, I ultimately say the end result is that the left will excise itself from society. It's exactly what they're doing right now. You've got the end of women's sports. Women's sports has become people in dress sports. It's no longer about biology. It's no longer about the differences between males and females. It's about sometimes people wear dresses and that's what a woman is. Therefore, if the argument from the left is that a woman is someone who identifies as an adult human female, and they change the definition to be such, then we need only call women's sports female sports, right? Problem solved. Female sports are about your assigned gender. I'll use the left's language on that one. Here's what I'll do. I'm libertarian. I'm centrist libertarian, a little left on some economic policies, a little right. I can rag on free market capitalism all day, baby. You look at the pharmaceutical companies whose profit motive is driven not by curing diseases, but by sustaining them and treating symptoms. Not a fan. I can be a little bit more right-leaning and be like, y'all are excising yourself from society. But I'm fairly libertarian, so do your thing. Live your life. Be happy. And the end result will be a Christian conservative nation. What can be said? Conservatives are desperately trying to save liberals from themselves, to prevent abortion, to make sure that they have kids and those kids persist, to stop the child abuse of these children so they can have families and persist. But if the right just sat back with a more libertarian view and said, do everything you want to do tenfold, the United States would not collapse. The liberal faction of the United States would collapse within a generation or two. I'm libertarian. I say let them do what they want. I'll tell them I think you guys are excising yourselves from the gene pool. They don't seem to care, so why should I? Give it 2 generations and their ideology is gone because they sterilize their kids and because they engage in dangerous, risky activities amid pandemics. It's funny, isn't it? They're like, Republicans aren't wearing masks. There's a pandemic. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Because they assume the right to make that risk. I will say the same thing of these men who are getting monkeypox. I don't think they're going to die or anything like that. But same issue. Be free. Do your thing. I will take care of myself. I will be responsible. I will try and spread values that I think are good. And those that refuse to accept them will eventually just no longer be a part of society when they don't have kids. That's it. I don't know, man. Crazy days. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.